Hello! Today I have your questions from an Instagram Q&A I did this week. I got tons and tons of questions, which I love, and there were lots of repeat questions, so I thought it would be helpful if I made a little video talking about the most common questions. And this video in particular, I'm going to be answering questions about 2-year-olds' speech and language development. For anyone new here, my name is Stephanie Hatlily. I am a pediatric speech therapist in California, and let's get started. Question 1. When should toddlers start putting words together? The milestone is 2-word combinations by 2 years old, so 24 months. Keep in mind that there are prerequisite or precursor skills to saying word combinations. You'll want to look out for your child to be saying at least 50 to 100-ish words on their own before you'd expect them to begin speaking in phrases or putting 2 words together. I'm going to link specifically a resource that gives you tips and simple, effective speech therapy activities you can use at home if you are working on putting words together with your toddler. Question number 2. My child is having trouble with the P sound, or pa. They're saying sassy instead of Paci when they're talking about their pacifier. Okay, this probably has nothing to do with the P sound whatsoever. I'm assuming that the child in this particular example is pronouncing the P or P sound in other words. What's actually happening is a process or a rule-based error, which speech therapists call phonological processes, where children simplify the pronunciation of a word in a rule-based way, or meaning it follows a pattern. They're making kind of the same type of errors. And these phonological processes are totally expected and a typical part of toddler speech development. The phonological process in this example is called assimilation. It happens when one consonant sound becomes the same as different consonant sounds in the same word, or another way to explain it is that your child uses one consonant sound twice in the same word. Other examples of this would be if a child says mime for mine or bobble for bottle. The process of assimilation will usually go away on its own by age 3. I've attached in the description my guide to common and expected toddler speech errors, so you can read more about the process of assimilation and learn about other expected toddler speech errors and compare them to what your little one is saying. Question number 3. My just turned 2-year-old isn't saying any words. He's been diagnosed with glue ear. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term glue ear, it's used to describe chronic ear infections where fluid builds up and gets really sticky or thick in the middle ear. And your middle ear is kind of like behind your eardrum, is very important for transmitting sounds, including speech sounds, to your brain. So it plays a role in your child hearing what you're saying to them. Put simply, if the middle ear is full of this like thick, sticky fluid, it makes it hard for your child to hear what you're saying. You can think of it as them trying to listen to you with their head underwater, or their ears covered in the water in the bathtub. It makes it really hard. If your child isn't saying words and they have glue ear, you'll want to talk to your pediatrician about visiting an ENT or an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Clearing up the ear infection is a top priority. If your little one can't hear what you're saying clearly, it's really hard to impossible for them to repeat what you've said. And some sounds and some words are easier to hear than others. But in general, we just want to clear up the ear infection because this is kind of an essential step in towards helping your child learn to talk. I'd also recommend a speech and language evaluation, which you can go ahead and ask your pediatrician for a referral and schedule that now so you've got it in the books. This can be really supportive for helping your toddler boost their language skills, especially after the ear infection has been cleared up. One way you can support their communication right now is by teaching your child baby sign language. So maybe they're already using some baby signs, or maybe you haven't explored this avenue of communication at all, but providing them with a way to express themselves or use language without relying on their speech, which they're developing, but we're going to clear up the ear infection first, is to use these baby signs. You can kind of, as the same as you would teach words, you will teach one or maybe a few baby signs at a time. The Baby Sign Language Dictionary online is a great resource, so you can learn the baby signs alongside your little one. There's no need to learn sign language completely unless you want to, or but you can kind of learn at the same pace as your child. They give video examples and some helpful tips to remember the different baby signs that you can use. I'll also link a blog post where I talk all about teaching baby sign language to your toddler, how it's helpful, and some just kind of general guidelines for getting started. Question number 4, should I be worried my newly 2-year-old cannot pronounce his name clearly? I know this is really frustrating, and I'm just going to be upfront. I cannot say 100% no, you don't need to worry if your 24 month or newly turned 2-year-old can't pronounce their name, but the answer is most likely no. A lot of toddler names are really hard to pronounce. They have later developing sounds, and they might have more sounds altogether. For example, the name Christopher would be hard to pronounce. Even Chris is pretty hard, as opposed to a name like Tom. So if your child isn't pronouncing their name, it's probably as a result of their name having harder to pronounce and later developing sounds, or it has a lot of sounds all together at once, which your child is still learning to pronounce, or kind of how to put those sounds together to say them is their name. One way you can encourage your child towards saying their names is by coming up with a nickname that is easier to pronounce than their full name. So you can think about the sounds that your child can already say in other words that also happen to be in their name, and come up with a creative nickname. For example, my name is Stephanie, and I really wanted my nephew to say my name. He can obviously say Gigi and Mama, Dada, the names for other people in our family, because they're already adapted and made easier for kids. So I told him to call me Nani, and it was a matter of, I think, 1 day before he started saying my name. So by coming up with a shorter, easier to pronounce nickname, you may help your child start to say their name, and then you can build off that nickname as their pronunciation skills improve. I also have a link for my tips and tricks for helping your toddler say their name, which is linked in the description for you. Question number 5. Is it normal for a 2-year-old to only say the first part of a word and to leave off the ending? The answer is yes. This is expected at 2 years old. As we talked about previously, toddler speech errors that follow a pattern, like leaving the sound off the end of a word, are called phonological processes. The phonological process that we're talking about when toddlers leave the sound off the end of the word is called final consonant deletion. So an example would be if they say bee instead of beach, or faux instead of phone. So they're leaving that final consonant sound off. This process usually goes away on its own by age 3. I do have a guide for helping your child learn to say those final consonants, which you can find, as you guessed it, in the description for this video. Question 6. My 2-year-old is replacing the F sound with an S sound. Is that normal? In short, yes. Toddler speech errors are very common. They make lots of mistakes because they're learning and they're just figuring out how to pronounce all these different sounds in tons of different combinations to say different words. Every toddler will not make the same mistakes in their speech because different toddlers learn different sounds. I mean, all toddlers learn sounds in about the same order, but just like vocabulary size, there is variability in what sounds a toddler learns or is able to pronounce at one time or another. And fun fact, this can also be impacted if your child is bilingual. They may learn some particular sounds earlier than their peers who are only speaking English. I'm going to link my speech sounds by age guide so you can take a look and see which sounds are expected for your child's age. And this is great because you can kind of see which sounds we'd expect them to have mastered or be able to pronounce in almost every word, and which sounds either aren't even expected to be learned yet, or might be emerging, meaning they can pronounce them in some words but not others. Number 7, I got lots and lots of questions about toddler stuttering and toddlers getting stuck on words. So we'll just talk about stuttering in toddlers in general and when it might be time to talk to your pediatrician and ask for the support of a speech therapist. We'll just start off by talking about what stuttering is. Put simply, stuttering impacts the person's ability to talk with smooth or fluid speech. And there are different types of stuttering, we'll say. There are repetitions, which happen when a child or an adult repeats a sound or a word many times over, like water. There are prolongations where one sound is held out, such as I want an apple. And there are also blocks where a person gets stuck trying to say a sound or a word and nothing comes out, like I need some help. Stuttering in toddlers, especially sound or word repetitions, is actually quite common. And most children who start stuttering as toddlers will stop stuttering without intervention. It's more of a short-lived developmental stage. And this type of stuttering is referred to by speech therapists as developmental stuttering. If your child has started stuttering, here are a couple of tips that you can use at home to support them. First, let your child finish their words or their ideas on their own. And I know this can be really hard, especially if you know what they're trying to say, but just give them the time to get the words out. Second, don't call attention to the stutter and try not to show them that you're stressed about it. Again, I know this can be easier said than done, but just play it cool. Third, you'll want to model a smooth and slower rate of speech for them. And you can repeat back phrases that they've stuttered, saying them smoothly and slowly, just to kind of cue them to maybe slow down the rate at which they're talking. Lastly, you might practice some general stress relieving activities like baby yoga or taking deep belly breaths, which might help your child kind of get through with some smoother speech. Okay, now we'll talk about when you might want to talk to your pediatrician and get a referral to see a speech therapist. And this would be the case if your child has we'll call it true stutter. And here are some characteristics to look out for when I would suggest seeking speech therapy for a child who is stuttering. If your child is stuttering and they're older than 3 years, if the stuttering has lasted longer than 6 months, based on the type of stuttering observed, repetitions are generally more common in developmental stuttering, and if your child has prolongations or blocks, it may be more indicative of a true stutter. And lastly, if there's a family history of stuttering. I know this is a lot of information all about stuttering, so as with everything else, I've linked a resource that's a great guide teaching you all about stuttering, the types of stuttering, and when to ask for help in the description below. Question number 8. Sometimes it's hard to understand what my 3-year-old is saying. Should I be worried? All right, the term speech intelligibility is used to talk about how easy or hard it is to understand what someone else is saying. We'll start at 18 months. Around 18 months, you'd expect to understand about 25% of what a child is saying. By 24 months, this increases to about half or 50%, and a little more if you're the child's primary caregiver. At 3 years old, you'd expect to understand about 75% of what a child is saying. And you'd understand or expect to understand 100% of what a child is saying by 4 years old. In general, keep in mind that in general, children may be harder to understand if they're tired, frustrated, really excited, or sick, and that's to be expected. If you have concerns about your child's speech, always consult your child's pediatrician. And I've included our information guide to speech intelligibility for toddlers and preschool-aged children in the description below. All right, that is a wrap for our questions. If you enjoy this Q&A format, be sure to like this video, leave me a comment. That lets me know that it was a success and we can continue to do more of these. It was so much fun for me, and I loved kind of being able to have just more of a free-flowing discussion and link all of the resources for you guys in one place. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel to get notifications for all of my newest videos, and I hope to see you back here soon.